for those of you that don't know, Adam, aka Rupert Cornelius, locally here in Southern California, he's one of the few people that have been successfully growing some of the more difficult species, more challenging species. So he's known for having Utricularia and Heliumphoras and things like that, that a lot of other people don't have. And so he's been a great resource. He's was a regular at LACPS, and so he was always popular for having kind of some of the more unusual plants outside of things like the Venus flytraps and Sarracenias that a lot of other people were bringing. So he started the hobby about 5 years ago, and the obsession started with a little Venus flytrap plant that he purchased off of Amazon, and he's out in the San Bernardino area. So his growing conditions are a little bit unique. I know that heat has been a constant challenge for him with some of the species he grows outside, but a lot of stuff he's growing inside with artificial lighting. I know he's a big fan of the Carson Technologies LEDs. He is actually a distributor for them now, and so hopefully soon you'll be able to purchase lights from him. So that's a great opportunity to get into some LED lights that our counterparts over at the cannabis industry have been utilizing for some time now. So that industry has done a lot of R&D and developed some really cool LED lights, and they work really well for our indoor situations. So without further ado, Adam, are you ready to rock and roll?
Yeah.
Cool.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you. Let me stop my screen share, and then I am going to, if I can find you, I'm going to pin your video so that it gets locked on everybody's screen. There we go. So everybody should be seeing Adam's camera now. Again, I'm going to mute myself at this point. Adam, go for it.
Okay. So just real quick to touch on something John brought up, those Carson Technology lights, what sets those apart from most other LEDs is they have a UV emitter that makes them, every plant I've put under there is just exploded with growth. So that's the unique thing about those. So today we're talking about Nepenthes with an emphasis on basal offshoots and what to do about them. So there's basically what it is the plant will send off a little shoot and start a new plant. And it'll do this under a couple of conditions. It can do it because the main plant is sick, and so it's like a stressed basal, or it can do it because the main plant is happy. So we're going to start with a couple of different examples of that. Right here is the Nepenthes Berkey bihumata. And this originally was a basal that I pulled off of another plant. And what happened was I left it in the Ziploc a little too long, and it got a little bit of rust on it. And even though it's already a basal cutting and hadn't produced any pictures, but you can see it started another basal. So we're going to look at taking that one off today. But so this is an example of a stressed basal. You can see the rest of the plant's not in very good shape. Same
Adam,
here.
Sorry, Adam, can you just double check your sound? There's some talk of the sound being a little garbled.
I don't know what else I can do. Or can you guys hear me okay right now or no?
Okay. Some people are saying they're fine. There is one person finding it difficult to understand.
Yeah, if you can.
Yeah,
like you're
I
at
hear
the
you
top.
good.
Yeah, if you could put your computer or whatever it is, your phone, a little bit closer, it might be a little clearer.
What I could do, I could go grab the phone and dial in instead. That might give us a better sound. You guys want to talk about something else for a minute or two while I go grab the phone?
Yeah, we can do that.
All right, let's do that. So yeah, basically, a basal is a shoot started by the plant. It can be started for a number of reasons. Either the main plant, something's wrong with it, it's in distress, and so it sends off the basal to kind of try like a last ditch effort to save itself, or it can be because it's happy. So this here is an example of one that sent the basil off to save itself. So what happened here was, this is Nepenthes by Berkey, and this was actually a basil that I removed, and I left it in a bag too long, and it got some rust. And before it even developed pitchers, it sent off a new basil. And so that's one of the plants we're going to cut today. And that's an example of a stressed basil. And same here, this plant, this is a no ID Nepenthes. It also got rust, and you can see the main growth isn't doing so well, but the basil there is pretty vigorous. And then here we have a Nepenthes fusca, which was the main plant's very happy. It's just growing right in the windowsill. I put a little a sheer curtain on my windowsill to keep the light intensity down for the summer. And it's got a nice vigorous basil here with some nice pitchers already starting. So that's good. That's what we like to see. So I didn't catch all of the conversation that Maggie had about some of the things that they've heard about basil cutting, but what I had really heard was that you want to take the plant and you want to cut off all of the pitchers so that it can focus its energy on rooting, and you want to cut as much of the leaf off as maybe even half of the leaf off to prevent water evaporating through the leaf. Now, I'm always kind of a renegade, so I don't do that. What I do is I leave all the leaves intact, and I don't take a cutting unless there is a pitcher, and I leave the pitcher so that I can feed the plant, so that it has energy to do the roots. And I'll give you an example of a plant that is not ready to be cut here. 1 second. So this is a Berkey by Hamada. That's what the pictures will look like on a mature plant. And you can see it's got a little basil there, but it doesn't have any pitchers, and it's only got a couple of leaves. So that's an example of one that I would give a little more time to, it actually does have a little pitcher there, but that's not big enough. But this is also another example of what can cause a basil, which is this plant grows like this, it hangs. And when the main vine drops below the soil surface, it triggers the basil here. So I started experimenting with that and growing all of my Nepenthes, or as many as I can, hanging at this angle here. And I've gotten quite a few basils because of that. Okay, so can everybody still hear me okay? Are we doing all right, or do I need to?
Sounds good right now.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay, so it's actually really simple. I take a couple of these small net pots here, very small pot. You don't need a big pot because it doesn't have any roots. And then I take pure LFS, pre-soaked, and you wring it out. And you just wrap that very tightly around the plant once you cut it, and throw it in that pot, and then throw it in a Ziploc. So without further ado, let's cut one of these basils. Let's start with this guy. So try and look at both of these at the same time. You got to kind of dig in there and see where's a good spot to separate it. And as Maggie mentioned, I think it's best to leave the root system for the mother plant. So I don't think I'm going to be able to do this on camera, But I'm going to take it down here and cut it real quick, and then we'll look at the potting process. And always, go ahead.
While you're doing that, when you do the cutting, I'm sure you'll explain it, but in case you don't, I want to make sure that you explain this. Are you removing any part of the tissue that's, I guess, attached to the mother plant?
So, can we see that right there?
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Kind of hard to tell. It's really just growing right off of the main stem. So I don't even know if I'm going to be able to use scissors on this one. I might have to use a razor. And I do not disturb the main stem if I can avoid it. So give me just a second here, and we'll see what that looks like once I get it off of there.
Yeah, so when I removed the basils on the eddy, we always removed a little bit of the tissue from the main stem if we couldn't get even a piece of root or something. And that's the way that the certain people who were wiser than me had me do the basils on the eddy.
Okay, there it is. That's it. It's just clipped right off. And then right here, you can see where it came from. A little raw spot. Let me point at it. Right there. That's where it came off. It's just a raw spot on the stem now. So this one, go ahead.
And do you feel like you need to do anything with that raw spot? I always wonder if that little hole that's left there is okay, or if anything needs to be done with it.
I guess if you're feeling inclined, you could maybe put a little bit of hydrogen peroxide on there. What I typically do, I didn't show this before I started, but I take my scissors and I clean them really well with alcohol, isopropyl alcohol, like 97%. And I do that in between each cutting so that we don't cross-contaminate anything. So here, you can see it's going to be kind of hard to wrap anything around the bottom of that. We got this little leaf here that isn't doing much, so we'll just go ahead and pull that off of there. Now we've got a little nub right there. That white material, that's where the roots are going to come out. So, take a little LFS here. And I take quite a bit, you know, that's kind of a lot for this size pot. But you want it in there really nice and tight. You want full contact up against that stagnum. So make a nice ball like that. And it feels like it's still going to be, like I could get a little bit more in there. So I'm going to wrap a little bit more around it. You're going to wring it out really well. You just want it damp. You don't want it sopping wet, because that's how you get rot or rust. Just add a little bit more to it there. You see that? Nice big wad. You take your pot and just cram it all in there. And you really want a lot of pressure, because that's what's going to hold that media up against that tissue that's ready to root. And kind of squeeze it in there real good. You guys can see that. And let all that drip out. And then before I bag this up, I'll take a osmocote pellet. One of these little guys here. I'll try and find the smallest one, and I'll stick it in one of the pitchers. Actually, looks like I have two pitchers on this one that can take a pellet, so I'll feed both of those, and then put it in a bag and just leave it alone. But we'll get to that part in a little bit. Let's do another cutting here. Let's see if we can get this Murky Hamada off of here. That's going to be this little guy here. So again, if you look, it's really close to the stem where it's coming off there. And you could almost just break it off, but you kind of want to use scissors or a knife. So just real quick, I'm going to do my alcohol one more time. Just a little bit on a paper towel. Clean off the scissors there. I guess clean is the wrong word. Disinfect the scissors a little bit. And I'm going to try and do this one under the camera. So bear with me here for a second while I find a good angle. There we go. Right there. Boink. Oh boy. Okay, that's going to be a problem.
What just happened?
It fell behind the washing machine.
Oh no.
I'll have to dig that one out in a little bit here. Let's move on to this next one.
Okay, but while you're doing that, I noticed you didn't use, you haven't chosen to use any rooting hormone.
That's correct. I don't have any rooting hormone.
Would you use it if you had it?
Yeah, another thing you can use is Super Thrive. That has a lot of the same stuff that's in rooting hormone, and it kind of promotes root health. I use Super Thrive on pretty much everything when I take divisions like helium-4 and stuff like that. I'll soak it in Super Thrive for 24 hours the day before. And then once I get it in the new media, I'll do another drench just to make sure that all those vitamins and stuff are present. If I can see. Oh, yeah, this one. I'm going to have to get that after the presentation. It fell all the way down. So, okay. Now we have the Fusca, and this was our healthy plant. This one, you can see the difference. You know, the whole plant is very happy. It's got pictures everywhere. So this is in good shape. We're not even really worried about the mother at all. And the Basal has a couple of different pictures. So I'm going to kind of pull the media back here. See if I can show you guys where it's kind of coming from. Kind of hard to see still, huh? So anyways, it's coming right there off of the stem. So we're just going to snip it right there after I wipe these down again.
That one almost looks like it could possibly have some roots of its own.
You think so?
Well, it's just big, and then sometimes whenever I see Nepenthes, when the basils rather, unless I'm not looking at it right, because I'm looking at it through a video, but on occasion when I have like a basal that's almost the size of the mother, sometimes I'll just remove the whole root ball out of and then I'll see that the basal actually has a bit of root system too.
Yeah, this has a pretty substantial root system there.
But that's chancy to disturb the whole root system.
Right. So what I'm looking at here, it's kind of hard to see on the camera there, but I'm pretty sure this is just coming off of the stem. So I'm just going to unpot it real quick and kind of dig in there a little bit better. Yeah, it's just coming right off of the stem. It's down below the surface. So I'm just going to snip it off.
And Don Schiller's saying that he would have removed the long stem mother and repotted to keep the basal to grow. And so this is the part that just drives me bananas. Every time I look at stuff, I go, well, what am I supposed to remove, the mother or the basal? And I've never heard any sort of explanation as far as what is it that we're using to determine which part of the plant should we remove.
You can see here where it's got some of the stem material from the mother plant still on there. And that was, see, this is the very first leaf that it had. We're just going to pull that off. I like to have a lot of the white material there. That's the tissue that the roots come out of. So to your question, Maggie, I try to take what looks the healthiest. So, you know, usually the basil looks pretty vigorous, especially in the plants where the basil was triggered by an unhealthy plant. But I have had a situation where the basil was doing really well and the mother plant was doing so bad I wasn't sure which one to go ahead and bet on. So I went ahead and took what I guess you'd call a vine cutting. And I'm going to grab that right now and show you guys how that turned out.
Maggie, if I can make a quick comment about your
Yeah,
question.
please.
So I'm relatively new to carnivorous plants, but I'm not new to plants. And the question you ask is an age-old debate amongst tomato growers. And so anybody that grows tomatoes, we know that the suckers that tomato plants produce, which are also vines, so at the little armpit of tomato plants, you'll get a little sucker, which is kind of like a basil, but you get it at every armpit of a tomato. And depending on who you ask, people will tell you pinch off those suckers because it's going to rob energy from the main plant. Other people will tell you that you just let it grow wild because those will eventually grow and become solar panels that feed the overall bush of tomatoes. So at the end of the day, I don't think you're going to get a straight answer. And I do think that there are nuances between different varieties, right? Because we know that some Nepenthes are better crawlers, creepers, climbers than others. You know, some are better at throwing upper and lower pitchers. Some just kind of creep around. So I think, and then we run into the world of hybrids where then it's a grab bag. So I think every time you ask that question, you're probably going to get a different response, you know, and it's, if the folks that have been growing tomatoes for thousands of years can't come to a consensus, I don't think Nepenthes growers ever will either. But like, you know, I look at those kind of similarities because we did the same thing with bonsai, because, you know, we do a lot of air layering techniques and it's very similar to this method. And then all the questions about, do we cut flowers? Do we leave flowers? Does it hurt the plant? Are flowers even photosynthetic? Like there's all these questions that I think just as a general across the board for all plants, it's hard to answer definitively. So I know that's probably not what you want to hear, but just thought I'd throw that out there. By the way, I like growing tomatoes, but I hate eating them. I know, I'm a weird one. So Adam, back to you.
A couple of questions in the chat here. For Gianni, I don't think that the plant can produce another basil from the same node, but I have had them produce a basil from right next to it. So you're not really taking away the plant's ability to produce basil. And then we've got, if you're repotting the plant anyway, yeah, that's a good time. The only thing being that when you repot any plant, you're going to stress it out a little bit. So you would be subjecting the mother plant to possibly a little bit more stress than you would just in a normal repotting. But I don't think it would be substantial. So I'm just going to open this up. This is one that the vine looked like really bad shape. And I had actually almost given up on it. Now you can see it's actually started to grow from two spots. One node activated here, and I didn't see this until just now. It's also growing right there from the tip, the old growth point. So this took about 2 months. It just sat there and did nothing for about 2 months, and then I looked at it the other day. I was like, oh look, there's a little bit of leaf coming out of there. So another big part of the equation is patience. And this one actually, I don't water these either. So this is still the the same method, just wrapped real tight and thrown in the pot, wrung out real good so it's just damp, not soaking wet, and then thrown in a bag. And then if anything, like maybe once every 3 or 4 weeks, I'll check it out. And when I put it back, you just blow the bag back up again. Like that, so it's all full of air and humidity, and then just put it back on the windowsill. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to pop this one up here, and then kind of walk you guys through what I do as far as the pellets and stuff, and bagging it, and then we'll go to question and answer. So in this one, because it's a much bigger plant, I'm going to use a little bit bigger pot. So that also means a little bit more LFS. And I'm going to show you again what I'm talking about. This is pretty wet. You can see all that water coming out of it. You can kind of see how it changes color. That's what you want, is that nice blonde color, just nice and damp.
Hey, Adam, did you do any sort of disinfecting of that LFS before you used it? Do you do that?
You know, I used to do that. I used to microwave it and all kinds of weird stuff, and and I just don't anymore, because it seemed like either way you still get the weird mosses and the weird grasses and all of that weird stuff that you think you're protecting against when you do that. But yeah, I guess, I mean, technically it's not a bad idea, but I don't.
So you were microwaving the LFS.
I would microwave it for about 5 minutes, and then strain it and all of that stuff. And I don't know. I stopped doing that about 6 or 8 months ago, and I haven't really noticed any ill effects from no longer doing that. So, but if you do that and that makes you feel comfortable, by all means, continue to do so. None of this is actually, I'm not an expert, and none of these are like set in stone methods. These are just some things that I've found that I have a little bit of success with. So you can see the big root, or the big ball of LFS there, and kind of wrap it real good right around the base of the plant. Stuff it in there. There you go. That's it. And this one, I might actually add a little bit of water to it, just because it got a little bit drier than normal. Then we'll take one of these little pellets. A nice little guy right there. And just slip it inside. There we go. And we got another pitcher here. It's kind of started to shrivel up a little bit. So I'll just take my scissors. Oops. Just snip off the dry part. And now you've got a little spot to put your next pellet in. And then I'll take my distilled water and turkey baster. Got a little water up. Just put a couple drops in there. And a couple drops in there. Maybe a little bit on the media there. Just a little though. So that was maybe like a teaspoon between both pitchers and the media here. And then this one's going to need a really big Ziploc. You got the 1 gallon Ziploc here. For me, this is the trickiest part, is getting the plant inside the Ziploc without any of the parts catching and disturbing how tightly packed that stem is. Sometimes you have a little awkward moment there, but just slide it in. Fill it up with air. And it's ready to be set on the windowsill and left alone for several months. And then once you've got new growth, that's when you know it's rooted. And typically I'll wait until I see a new leaf come all the way out and start to produce a pitcher. And then once that pitcher has started and a new leaf has started, that's when I'll take it out of the Ziploc, and I'll put a smaller Ziploc over it and start cutting away at that Ziploc to slowly acclimate it to your standard room humidity. And then, you know, once you've got it acclimated to standard room humidity and it's still growing nicely, that's the good time to go ahead and take it. You want to get it out of the pure LFS once it starts growing, because again, that can lead to rot or rust or some of those other fungal infections that are just not good for what you're trying to do. So that's pretty much it. Let me look at this chat here and see if I can see some of the questions. Okay, so it says here, so when you take stem cuttings, you should bury as many nodes as you can for future basils. I really don't do that. And you guys could see from that first plant I showed you that was actually, it was a removed basil, and it just had a little bit of that white material down at the base when I cut it and potted it. And maybe 3 months later, it already sent out a new basil. So I don't really think that has anything to do with it. Yes, blow the breath of life into the bag first. So that's all I got, guys. Do we have any questions?
Let's see. Let's go back to the chat, see if anybody, how many growth points should you keep on a mature plant? 2 strong ones is one question that came in.
Yeah, that's so I actually have an example of that. Let me clear this out here and show you guys. I meant to show this plant earlier. It's going to be a second to get this untangled here. So this is actually the first Nepenthes I ever bought. And this is from Native Exotics. See if I can get it to.
Can't really see it.
Yeah,
maybe.
Can't see it at all. So it's Nepenthes ventricosa by Ramaspina. That's Borneo Exotics 3507 is that plant. And when I got it, right at the end of 2005, it was that size, just this little guy right here. And now you can see it's got 2 very viney growth points and has another basil. So this I wanted to show as an example of you don't necessarily have to take the basil. If the rest of the plant is doing well and everything is looking good, you can leave the basil too. And then, as you can see, it will eventually send out another one and another one and another one, and you can end up with a pot just just full of vines coming out of it. I've seen that too. But I would suggest once you start to see any kind of a decline on the main vine, that's when you want to make that decision. Okay, am I going to take the basil or am I going to take vine cuttings? And on this plant, I would probably leave the basil and then maybe make a vine cutting out of this, because you want 3 leaves for a vine cutting. So 1, 2, 3, cut there, 1, 2, 3, cut there, 1, 2, 3, cut there. So you could end up with like 6 plants off of just this one vine. So maybe we'll do that demonstration next time. We'll do vine cuttings.
I have a question, and it might open a can of worms that I don't want to open. But so in the world of orchids, Braulio, Braulio, there is a powder or paste they use to grow keikis. For those of you that don't know what a keiki is, it's a baby plant, basically a basil shoot that grows out of orchids as well, out of their flowering stalks usually. And so I'm curious if anybody's ever tried using that. Basically, it's a concentrated hormone, kind of like a rooting hormone, but it's an auxin hormone that they use on orchid plants. I wonder if anybody's tried that on Nepenthes.
So Brad from Brad's greenhouse is using he's using kiki paste and some other proprietary mix of vitamins and stuff.
Well, that guy doesn't know what he's doing.
Yeah. And he's trying to do just that, basically make a rooting compound or rooting hormone for Nepenthes, specifically for Nepenthes.
Oh, you mean somebody already had my idea?
I'm afraid so. So yeah, I think the last time I checked into that blog that he was doing, it was probably about 6 or 8 months ago, and he had reported enough success that he felt he was going to start making his magic potion commercially available. And all he would say about it was that it was a combination of kiki paste and then some of his own stuff that he added in. So yeah, that's definitely a possibility. Now see this one, I just want to show this here. This one's too wet. If I pot that, I don't know if you guys can see, it's dripping out when I squeeze it. So if I was to put this in the Ziploc right now, probably wouldn't be good. So I'm going to let this one sit and kind of dry out a little bit. You want the media to kind of have the same moisture level as your dish sponge. Like when you're done doing the dishes and you wring it out really good, it's still a little bit damp, but it's not so sopping wet. That's kind of what you want your media to be when you put these in the Ziploc.
Hey, Adam, there was a question in the chat asking about if you change your media after you take it out of the Ziploc bag, or do you continue to just use pure long fiber spag?
Yes, I do change the media. So once you notice the growth and you've got it hardened off to your regular growing conditions, it's no longer in the Ziploc ICU unit. That's when you want to go ahead and change the media, and whatever your traditional Nepenthes mix is. I tend to use like a 30-30-30 LFS perlite and either aquatic planting soil, which is just fired clay pellets, or I'll also use orchid bark. And orchid bark has the nice big chunks of perlite in there. So it's kind of like a little bit more perlite than normal. And that's also the same mix that I use for my helium flora as well. I can provide a link to that, the exact mix, if you guys want. Just give me a second I'm going to go ahead and shut down this camera and start pulling this dryer out so I can get that basil that we dropped back behind there. So if everybody's done with the questions, maybe we can move on.
I have, oops. I just had another question. How many basils is too many? I have one that has 3 basils popping at the same time right now. So should I take the smallest ones off so that the bigger ones can grow better? Or yeah, and it already has 2 mature growth points on it too. It's just very vigorous.
So it's got 2 mature growth points and then a large
And
base-
3 little basils starting.
little basils. My suggestion would be to take, I would remove the biggest basil because that one's going to be the largest drain on the plant and also going to have the best chances of surviving and rooting. And then leave the smaller ones because they're not really draining on the plant too much. And when they get a little bit bigger, then you can decide if you want to do vine cuttings for the vigorous part, or maybe take another 1 or 2 of the other basils. But I don't really think that there's you know, like a set rule of thumb per se for how many is too many or how many is enough. My suggestion would be to just keep an eye on the plant as a whole. And if it starts to look like it's putting a drain on the mother plant in some way, then you might want to start considering, you know, whether you want to make vine cuttings or if you want to take one of the basils, or if you're still a little nervous about it, then, you know, and it looks like it's doing okay, there's not a problem with leaving them either. Again, really the only problem comes when it starts to be a drain on the mother plant, and you can start to tell, like, okay, maybe it's not picturing like it used to, or the leaves are kind of looking. Another really good indication that it's a drain on the mother plant is newer leaves will actually be smaller than older leaves, and then you know you got a problem. But yeah, I don't think there's a such thing as too many.
We have 2 other good questions coming in from the chat. One, Don asks, has anyone tried bonsai mix or akadama for the plants?
Yeah, so the APS, the aquatic planting soil, or turfus, I initially started using that for helianthera, and that's very similar to the bonsai soil. And it works really great. It works so well with the helianthera that I started using it with the Nepenthes, and it just works really well. It allows for a very freely draining mix, and it also allows for nice nooks and crannies for the beneficial bacteria like great white to get in there, and it gives it a little home for that. So yeah, those, I think that would work very well in lieu of turfus or APS. Like if you had
I've used akadama, and I've been told that akadama, when you remove a lot of the organic materials in media and you use an inorganic mix, that you can actually sit the Nepenthes in a sliver of water, and you won't worry about the traditional worries around rot. And I've actually done that, and it actually works.
Yep. Another one I've used is cocoa coir. That one's a little bit trickier. I have actually had some plants not like it and just flat out die in like 3 or 4 days. So that was kind of, but other plants love it, and I've had like 5 or 6 basils and just left them and haven't repotted like that. The particular plant that I'm talking about has 7 or 8 growth points now, and it's been in the same media for probably 5 years, and that's just orchid bark and coconut bark, and that's actually the same mix as that Ventricoso by Ramaspina from Native Exotics that I showed a few minutes ago. That one hasn't been repotted in, geez, at least 4 years. Which, if it had LFS in it, I would have had to repot it twice already in that time period.
And one more question from chat. The question is what the success and failure rate with the method that you had just shared with us today?
So far, I've done 12 like this and had 1 fail. So I don't know what percentage that is, but it's better than 90% success rate in my growing conditions. And that, of course, is, you know, your mileage is going to vary with different things that you do. I really think that the feeding the pitcher and leaving the plant intact, I think it stresses the plant much less. And then bagging the plant gives it that 100% humidity. And then another thing I try to do is I try and put the basil that I removed, I try and put it back in the same, almost the same exact growing conditions that the mother plant was in. So if I can, I'll put it right next to the mother plant, just in a bag. And yeah, I think I've lost one plant out of 12. And now we're up to, I've done 15 now. So we'll see how these ones pan out.